The official Attack on Titan VR game finally got its full release that unlocks all the chapters of the campaign mode, as well as coming with a massive update to the gameplay and much more. But how good is it really, and should you play it? Let's dive right into it. Now, Attack on Titan is known as one of the most influential and beloved series ever made, and for a lot of people, it is also their first introduction to anime in general. So making a VR game based on this massive franchise was not a small task at all, and even more so since it was specifically made for the Meta Quest 3 headsets with no PC VR option available. However, while the game's release got delayed multiple times, the beta version did see the light of day eventually. But it still had a lot of problems, as well as the later half of the game, known as Chapter 3 and 4, still being locked away. Luckily, with their 1.0 update, you can now get access to these last two chapters, as well as a bunch of different game modes that have been added to it. So let's take a look at these big changes by starting this review with the gameplay. Now, one of the biggest problems that has mostly been fixed thanks to the full release is that the frame rate and performance are a lot more stable than they used to be before, and that means that your overall experience should feel a lot more smooth. But probably one of the first things that you will notice once you boot it up is the graphics itself. Because while a lot of users had some very high expectations when they first saw the teaser trailer, in reality, some parts of the game look a bit more rough, and this becomes even more visible when you look at these massive titans, for example. And sadly, not that much has changed when it comes to this aspect of the game, so it is good to keep your expectations in check, since this might not be the best looking experience that is available on your headset. But of course, all the other aspects of the gameplay make more than up for it, because once you look past the slightly washed out graphics, the experience itself of flying across the city while trying to slay these huge titans is a dream come true for many of us. But even if you haven't watched the original show, you actually don't need any prior knowledge of the source material beforehand, since all the context of the setting is helpfully explained during their brief opening segment, which basically boils down to that the titans continue to hunt down humanity, and where you will play as a new recruit in the Survey Corps with a lot of familiar faces like Eren and Levi to accompany you. And after this short brief, you will be put into the game's tutorial to help you get used to the straightforward control scheme. This goes from learning how to use your own omnidirectional mobility gear to using the limited gas supply to help you control your mid-air directions. And all of these feel perfectly suited for VR motion controls, of course. But on top of that, just like the anime, your ODM gear also doubles as your weapon, meaning it lets you slice these titans with blades that gradually deteriorate before breaking down. So it will require you to keep check of this and find the ammo boxes across the city to stock it back up. And when you do land a final blow on a massive titan, it feels pretty badass. But you could also go for the more tactical way and slow them down by slicing off a limb, despite the fact that those arms and legs will gradually regenerate. So you will have to be quick with that. But while you're doing all of this, you will be completing the standard missions within the game, and these can give you points that can unlock a bunch of blades that are equipable at your base, while also adding different stats for wire length, durability, and attack power, which are a welcome variety to fit your own playstyle. But that gets us to the campaign mode, because this title is divided in a total of 4 chapters, with the first and second one containing 10 missions in total that will always reward you up to 5 stars based on your performance within it. But the newer chapter 3 only contains 4 missions instead, and the final chapter even just a single one, which is a boss fight, making the game overall feel a bit short. But to explain it a bit further, the standard missions that we just mentioned usually involve killing a set number of titans within a time limit, and while this can get a bit repetitive fast, it does feel satisfying, especially when they throw in a slightly trickier abnormal titan. But there are also some other type of campaign missions. These involve straightforward supply gathering or defending a strategic location from some enemy waves. And overall, the balance of these feel a lot better in the later chapters than the early access release did. But keep in mind that the overall game will probably just take you 4 to 5 hours to complete, which is a bit disappointing since a lot of people were hoping to have a bit more content added to the game. But perhaps the team was running out of time here to make ends meet. Either way, I don't think it would have hurt if the campaign had a bit more to offer. Luckily, they did add in a co-op mode so that you can jump into these fights with your friends together. Or you can even choose to brawl it out in some public matches. But one thing that sadly is a bit of a downgrade with the 1.0 update is that in the solo mode, your AI companions now have a lot more of an active role. And where you might think this is a good thing, they often don't respond at all and just create more problems than actually being helpful. So I hope that this is just a temporary bug and that the future update will save them from dragging you down during your titan hunting. But before we get to the most important part, let's have a quick word from the company that made this video possible, because because none other than Cat VR, who are known to create VR treadmills that look like they come straight out of Ready Player One, are taking VR once again to the next level. Because while we normally are limited by the space and boundary system inside our virtual reality experiences, it is Cat VR that has been creating VR treadmills that let you run, crouch, and jump without any limitation. And since their most recent version, that is known as the C2 Core, is compatible with nearly every headset, it is often also considered as the dream upgrade for any VR setup. And they even go so far that for those hardcore fans, they also have high-end models that include things like haptic feedback or a vehicle hub, making it feel even more realistic, like riding on a horse inside VR. And as a cherry on top, you can also use the code VRelity for a $130 discount on your entire purchase. So for those who are interested, I'll leave a link in the description below. But that gets us to the comfort of Attack on Titan. Because while flying across buildings with your ODM gear kind of makes you feel like a real-life Spider-Man, it is good to keep in mind that the experience itself can get pretty intense. So if you're new to VR, you might experience something known as motion sickness. And if this is the case, it would be best to just go for some more relaxing titles first and get used to virtual reality a bit. But if that's not the case, then just go all out at the speed of Levi himself. Either way, when you aren't flying through mid-air, the on-foot movement will make use of the artificial stick-based locomotion, with no option for teleportation. But since this is pretty slow, you can also sprint by swinging your arms, or hold them behind your back in a Naruto-like ninja style that you can choose in the option menu. Just keep in mind that there isn't a specific left-handed mode to select, but since the inputs are mirrored across both controllers, it shouldn't be a big problem. And of course, there's also a basic seated and standing mode for the gameplay available. But surprisingly, there aren't any vignettes or blurs to be found in this motion-intense game, which would have been great, especially since there is so much movement going on all the time. But another important thing that we should definitely talk about is of course the price, because when this game was in early access, it only costed a total of $5. And best of all is that while at the time it only included the first 2 chapters, the people who got it back then will now get the last 2 included for free. While if you would buy it completely new right now, it would cost you $18 instead. Now of course, this still isn't a crazy price tag for VR games, but it does feel a bit on the higher side, especially with the many bugs that are still present. But it might still be worth getting, and there are also still some future updates coming. These will include things like a global challenge mode, to the addition of the famous Thunder Spear being included. And as a little bonus, I also left a link to the game in the description below that can at least get you 20% of discount on it. But that gets us to the final conclusion. Now, Attack on Titan VR Unbreakable is the first official virtual reality game based on this highly popular franchise. And while the full release now includes 4 extra missions, a boss battle, as well as extra gear and a brand new co-op mode, it still feels like the campaign is a bit on the short side, while the potential is definitely there. And even though the game got a price increase after it fully got launched, I definitely think it can still be worth it, especially with the future updates still adding a lot of new things to the game. Either way, if you are a big fan of the series, you will definitely enjoy the gameplay, even though the graphics might not be something to write home about, because it is the feeling of taking down these massive titans that is so incredibly cool to experience in virtual reality. But that's not all, because there are also some other must-play games for your MetaQuest headset. So click on the video that you see on screen right now to make sure you don't miss out. And of course, stay awesome.